I'm extremely excited about this video today because this is an area we're going to talk about, and I have a really special guest I'm going to introduce in a second, but this is an area that I don't specialize in, but I think is going to be arguably one of the most important areas for people to focus on if they need to help their students and kids prepare for college to protect their retirement. And so I have a very special guest here. I'm really excited. She's an author, she's a speaker, she's my go-to for college planning advice and expertise. She wrote this book, Wealth Beyond Taxes. I'm really excited to welcome Monica Felton. Monica, thanks for joining me today.
Danny, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be talking about what's nearest and dearest to my heart, which is how do we make college more affordable?
So important. And what's cool is a little background. So Monica and I got introduced through a mutual colleague, and we went to lunch, and I think it was supposed to be just a quick meet and greet, and it turned into like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours of just talk, because I was just so excited to hear and finally talk to somebody who knows how to do this and how they're serving people at a high level and making sure that families are protecting their wealth and in the best position possible for college planning. So I was like, you got to come and chat with me for a little bit. So thank you for giving me some of your time. I'm really
my pleasure. Thrilled
glad
to
you're here. So let's start with why college planning? Why is that your focus and so important for people to be paying?
I got into the industry about 15 years ago, and we asked lots of questions about so what brought you to me, and I always asked, what's that one thing that keeps you up at night financially? What are you worried about? And 95% of my prospects said college. How am I going to afford college? And it was interesting because 15 years ago, I had two little bitties. My girls, were basically 4 and 5. And so I started thinking about college, and it's astronomical what parents, middle-class families are expected to pay for college. And so my heart breaks when, we put so much effort and energy getting our kids through high school and hoping that we can provide them an amazing college education. But when you find out a 4-year diploma costs about $130,000 today, it's very humbling, shocking, makes you angry. So I have, for the last 15 years, really made it my soapbox to help families prepare early, understand the truth around college, so that they can be more successful and have choices, that day they send their superstars off to college.
Yeah, that's a beautiful mission. I was watching a sitcom recently, and the mom and the dad were sitting at the kitchen table, and they were looking at this home equity line of credit proposal because their youngest son was getting ready to go to college. And they were really lamenting over this decision of do we borrow the money from the house to get our kid to go to college? And, and then he walked in and saw the stress and the dread in his parents' faces and offered to stay home and work. I mean, it's just a situation you don't want to put your kids, you want to give them the best chance possible, and you want them to succeed and go to the best schools and have the best opportunities, but not at the cost of your entire life savings. And
what families don't understand is middle-class families, college will be the second largest expense other than their house. And remember, your house you can finance for 30 years. College must be paid for in 4. So when you have 2 kids, I mean, an average family making $120,000 to educate 2 college kids in state public education, the 2 of them's about $300,000.
Wow.
I know. And the numbers are shocking.
Yeah, that is shocking. I sit down with a lot of parents, and they just tell me, admittedly, their plan is that they hope their kid gets a scholarship. I mean, that's the plan.
I know.
I want to have a better solution than that,
Yes. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here, because if we can start planning when your babies are in the womb, or 4 or 5 or 6, we can create a much better plan than I hope you get a scholarship, which the more we talk, you'll learn colleges are pretty stingy. It's hard to get scholarships. There's just not a lot of money out there.
Yeah, and it's selfishly, admittedly, I'm excited because my girls are at this time 5 and 2, so I'm sitting here.
Perfect, absolutely.
Oh, I need to plan and get set up with you as well. So how did you get into college planning? I mean, I know you talked about why you're in it and where your heart is, but how did you really get into this this niche of planning for people?
I really started by just doing a lot of research around college, and, we'll talk about some terms. There's, the FAFSA, your EFC, your COA. So I just started really understanding what it is the government's looking for to determine your need. And then I started speaking at high schools. So in the state of Arizona, I'm known as the college planning expert. I speak at over 15 private and public and charter schools a year.
Wow.
Just helping to disseminate the information and give families information early so they can differentiate what's true compared to what's false. And as you and I both know, in the financial world, there's a lot of opinions and downright falsities.
Yeah.
And college is a big piece of this. So
yeah, that's such a good point. I just did a video and I was talking about my favorite economist always says that if you put a family situation, a financial situation in a room full of financial advisors of like, say 500 advisors are in the room, you'll get 500 different best ways to do something. And there should be just one like efficient way to do it. So talk to me. I know you touched on like a brief example in our intro, but how much, like, let's say you have 2 kids in the state of Arizona, how much are you telling people that, like, what do they need to plan for in terms of realistic costs?
So the first thing we have to understand is, what is your expected family contribution? So what does the government expect you to pay? And so today it's about 25% of your gross income. That includes everything, right? So you don't get to take any deductions out of that. So if I make $100,000 a year, the government's going to say I can afford to spend $25,000 per year to educate one child. They also look at your assets, and your assets include everything with the exception of cash value life insurance, annuities, and money already in your 401k. So assets are assessed at 6%. So again, to give an example, if I make $100,000 a year and I have $100,000 of visible assets, the government says I can afford to pay $30,000 a year to educate one child.
Oh my gosh, that just seems unrealistic, because when you factor in like taxes in there, and then you factor in the cost of living and healthcare and housing and inflation, it just seems like that dollar gets squeezed so much. And it's like, how do you help families to maximize that? So
That's
they
right.
can, make sure that they're like able to have some type of leverage or benefit or something to help offset all these just expounding costs. It really is mind blowing to see how much that is.
I think what families have to realize, and I'm not sure where this happened, but the government expects families to pay for college. This is not a government responsibility, right? So now in some instances, if you make $60,000 or less, you will be eligible for some what I call need-based financial aid, and that's help from the government. But if you make over that, really college is your job, the family's job to pay for. So I don't think anyone anticipated the skyrocketing prices of college. And what's interesting is back in 1972 is when the government created Sallie Mae. That's the loan program from the government to help students pay for college. Well, ever since the government has gotten involved, we've had a 1,400% inflation on college. That's 3 times the rate of regular inflation. So when the government gets involved to make things more affordable, it does exactly the opposite, and college is no different.
Yeah, well, we've seen plenty of examples of that. I mean, look at like the post office and then UPS. I mean, it's just it's unbelievable how that they're trying to help and do something to be beneficial, and then it ends up becoming way more costly. So that brings me to another thing that we talked about that I'm curious about, that I don't understand. What is really the difference between college cost and like the expense of college? Like how do you differentiate?
Right. No, thank you for asking that. So there's one thing when we write a check for something, right? That's the expense. So my expense for college going to ASU is $130,000. That's what I actually write a check for. But people forget that one financial truth is money is always compounding. It's either compounding for me or somebody else. So when I write that $130,000 check, I give that money away to the college so they get to enjoy the compounding. So the $130,000, the true cost is $130,000 at interest for the next 25, 35, 45 years. So what I try to help parents understand is when you write that check for $130,000, that's money you will not have in your retirement. So $130,000 at 5% interest is about $350,000 that I will not have in my retirement.
Wow.
Because I chose to help my kids pay for college. And hopefully we'll get into it, but trust me, there's a better way to save and pay than just writing a check or spending down an asset. So that's what's really important for families is, you know, when we're talking about retirement, college is really a retirement problem, not necessarily a cash flow problem, because you're not going to have that in retirement. Wow. And I say this all the time, and of course everybody laughs, but it's true. When you're 80 years old and you're out of money because you chose to help your kids with college, they're not going to care that you paid for college. They don't want you living with them. Plan better for your retirement.
Wow. Powerful. Yeah, that is, I've never heard somebody bridge those two phases of life so well, because I view our job as as financial professionals as helping people through these phases of life.
Right.
So there's like, you know, college, there's, you know, pre-retirement, there's in retirement, there's like a long-term care phase, all these different phases that you could help people with and provide guidance through. And I think that's so insightful to say, okay, well, really, you got to think long-term in terms of wealth building and compound interest, because that 130 grand that you write that check for, you lose 130 plus all the interest that 130 will make for you over the rest of your life. And then, you know, you're trying to do something great today, but are you going to end up being a burden on your family later because you don't have enough money? And it's a really important decision. You got to get it right. That's really well said. I love that. Okay, wow, that's incredible. So I think a lot of people watching this, and we're going to get to some solutions here in a second, that'll be the encouraging part of this conversation, because I think a lot of people are probably thinking, well, my kids are probably going to go straight to the workforce after hearing some of this. But like, there's this term you brought up earlier called a FAFSA. And I want to touch on that, because I think unless you've had somebody go through college or you've been through college yourself, you don't really know what that is. So what is a FAFSA, and should families be attempting that on their own, like filling it out?
Right. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's a government form that has to be filled out if you're looking for help to pay for college. Now, the FAFSA can be filled out your student's senior year, October. So as we're coming into the month of October, that's a really important month for colleges, because that's when the FAFSA opens up, the free application for federal student aid, but also the CSS profile, which is another financial form that those Ivy League schools or very prestigious schools use. So if you're asking for money and you need help, then you must fill out the FAFSA. Now, we went through something called the FAFSA Simplification Act in 2021 to help sort of simplify the FAFSA. I don't think the FAFSA is difficult to fill out, but you just have to understand what information to put where. Like, they're going to ask for your gross income. How much did you pay in taxes? Where is all your wealth? Do you have assets? They'll ask for that information for both the parents and the student. And as discussed earlier, the FAFSA is really what's going to drive what a family is expected to pay for college.
Wow. Okay. So in terms of like families attempting this on their own, because it's probably simple in some ways, but I can remember thinking back to college. Like, I remember filling out my portion, and I remember like my parents coming to me saying, oh my gosh, this FAFSA is like a nightmare of like a form, because they want everything. Like, what should people do about a FAFSA form? Like, are there resources that you can look at to fill those out? Or
you know, again, there are lots of resources online that you can look to. One of my favorite go-to books is called, it's by the Princeton Review, and it's called How to Pay for College Without Going Broke. They have a new version every single year, but it's the most comprehensive book I've ever found on true college financial planning, and how to make college more affordable. But in that section, there's a whole bunch about how to fill out the FAFSA, etc.
Okay. So what is the best way that you would recommend people pay for, like, what's the best way to pay for college?
So in my opinion, so for 15 years, I've been helping families do that. The government will tell you use a 529 plan along with every traditional financial planner out there. I'm of a different belief. I believe in an alternative way to save and pay for college. And so what I encourage families to do is to save in a properly structured dividend paying whole life insurance contract. And the first thing people will say is, what? Life insurance? What are you talking about? So there usually is a lot of education that's required, but using what I call this wealth builder strategy, it's also called infinite banking. In essence, when you put money into this life insurance contract, the money is guaranteed to grow tax deferred, compounding every single year. You have full access and liquidity to this account. Now, what's really fantastic is when we go to use the money for college, our money continues to compound for the rest of your life. And it's just such a phenomenal strategy. Now, I'd love to say that I created this, but I didn't. This whole life insurance has been around for over 200 years. Almost every bank in America employs the whole life strategy. And I encourage families to look this up because, again, whole life has gotten a bad name, but funny enough, that's what all the banks are doing. So if all the banks are implementing whole life to create wealth in a tax favorable environment, why are they not telling us to do that?
Yeah, I know.
And yet they are. Also very wealthy people, Tim Robbins does it, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Warren Buffett puts all of his investments into whole life insurance, and then he goes and buys real estate and everything else. So what I do is I teach people these wealth builder strategies because, again, one of the biggest expenses a family's going to make is college. So the wealth builder strategy helps us to recapture and recycle that money. Imagine continuing to earn interest and dividends guaranteed for the rest of your life on the cost of college. It's very, very powerful.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. When I watched your webinar that you put together, I was blown away. I didn't even realize how intertwined like whole life insurance was, like institutionally, with all these different, I mean, it's amazing.
Right. And the deeper you dig into all of this, what you find is the big CEOs at Bank of America, their money's not invested in the market. They're in annuities. They're in life insurance. They have their money in these pension type vehicles with guarantees, tax deferred, ability to leave a legacy, full liquidity and access. So this is why I'm so passionate, because I want the day-to-day person like you and me to be saving wealth or saving money like the wealthy people are. I want us to be wealthy just like them. And you just have to learn alternative strategies to save and pay for things.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I think some people that are like conspiracy theorists, they think the wealthy are like meeting in these secret rooms and talking about ideas and laughing at the rest of us for not using them. But like, then I started Googling after I watched your webinar, and it's all over. I mean, there's so many examples of wealthy people using whole life insurance. It's like, it's not even a secret. It's just like out in the open. And
Right.
I think that it is wise to help people to learn about this strategy early.
Right.
Because like you said, keeping that money compounding tax-free in your life forever,
Right.
that could be the difference between being 80 and having a retirement or some type of nest egg and not. So I think that's really incredible.
Well, I love this quote. It's by Will Rogers. And he says, the problem with America isn't what they don't know. It's what they think they know, and it just ain't so.
Wow. Well said. Yeah, because there's so much anti-life insurance like rhetoric and education out there that people are pushing. But in reality, if you just take a step back and try to learn it from all perspectives, you could see the value in it for some cases, like something like this, which is great. So I'm really excited that we're talking about this and going deeper. So just tell me kind of like, because you mentioned 529 plans. I think that's like the common standard for people saving for college. What's really the key differences between using this type of strategy, like whole life insurance, and a 529 plan?
Right. So a 529 plan is a government savings plan. So never lose sight of that. And I always laugh when the government creates a product to solve the problem that they created, right? The high cost of college. Oh, what? We did that. So let's create a 529. So a 529 plan is a government savings plan that must be invested in the stock market. So you have to take risk with this money. And I just did an annual review with a client where she chose to put money in whole life 7 years ago, as opposed to a 529. So I did a comparison. Well, for the last 6 years, right, the market's done pretty well. But this year, 2022, the market's down 30%. So if she had $100 in her 529, in January, she now has 70, right? So number one, 529, there is a loss. They can lose money, and we don't know when that's going to be. Alternatively, whole life, guaranteed to grow every single year, compounding, no loss feature. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is that the 529 plan is a visible asset on the FAFSA. So if you've been saving in a 529 plan, you have to report that on the FAFSA, and they count that against you. It reduces your need-based financial aid. Whole life is an invisible asset on the FAFSA. So you can save a bunch of money in there and it will not be counted against you.
That's so fascinating. So let me interrupt you real quick. So you're saying that the vehicle they use to save, also you have to report on the FAFSA and they count that as your visible assets.
It's a government savings plan, of course. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Go ahead. On the, please.
No, that's okay. It is important. People need to be processing and asking good questions about why is the government so pushing me down this avenue, right? So anyway, the 529 is a visible asset on the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And then number three, a 529 plan must be used to pay for college expenses, room, board, obviously tuition and fees. Well, again, I just had a client who said, my son's not going to go to college. So if you've saved this money in a 529 and your student chooses not to go to a traditional college, the government will charge you a 10% penalty to withdraw the money out of the 529. So they penalize you if it's not used for college expenses. Conversely, whole life, I can use the cash value on whatever I want. I could help my son start a business. I could help my son go to a trade school. I could help my son buy a new car, move out of my house. I get to do with my money whatever I want in the whole life. I am in control. The government is in control of your 529 plans, and they have lots of rules and regulations.
Wow. I mean, if you think about that, though, it's kind of interesting because, again, not to get too conspiracy theory, but like just from their perspective, okay, they're the ones in charge of determining how much you can afford for college. They're determining what's a visible asset. And then I think a lot of people would reconsider that 529 if they knew that.
Right.
You know, because it's gonna ultimately be counted against you for potential student aid. Did I say that correctly, or am I?
You certainly did. Yeah,
okay.
That's absolutely true. So, you know, again, I think a lot of times people get pushed into vehicles when they don't know all the details. 529s are sold by, oh, hey, you get a tax deduction. By the way, that tax deduction is tiny, tiny. And if you lose 30% of the money in there and you don't get to use it on anything you want, you have to pay a 10% penalty. Who cares?
Right.
So I just really encourage families to understand, right? Just ask some good questions. Because number one, if you know your student's going to college, you can't afford to lose the money. And we have had a significant loss in the market in 2000, 2008, right? 2020, and now 2022. Losses happen. We just don't know when they're going to be.
Wow. That's really well said too. Yeah. Because if you got a student that's like 18 and they're like right there, and you
That's
think,
right.
well, it's really no different than retirement. I mean, if you're approaching your time horizon, you're at the end and you're getting ready to use the money, that's a really interesting point that I didn't consider. It is like the timing of like, when is your kid going to go to school versus how everything's doing in the economy. That's incredible.
Right.
So on that, I got one last question I really want to ask. Like, what's the biggest mistake you see that families are making in terms of planning for college?
Well, you said it earlier. I think my kids are going to get scholarships.
Oh,
The lack of planning. Hope is, I think, a beautiful thing, but it's certainly not a strategy. So I always say we plan for the worst and we hope for the best. Because, and I just get chicken skin all over, because in 15 years, the worst thing is if your student does everything they're supposed to do and they get into the best school they possibly can, and you say, oh, I can't afford to pay for it. That is devastating, not only to your child, but it is truly something that could have been avoided. So plan early, get everybody on the same page. Money will be a deciding factor, maybe not but certainly the top 3 deciding factors of where your student goes to college. So talk about it. Let's have an understanding. College is expensive. So what can you really do? And that's my biggest encouragement is don't hope, plan. And that's where you're going to have the best college experience for you and your student.
oh my gosh, incredible. I see why you're such a great speaker. There were so many amazing, powerful statements that you made today. And I'm so grateful that we got to spend some time together. So you have a book, you have a YouTube channel, which I've seen, and there's some incredible content. I'm going to put the link. If you want more information on how to connect with Monica, if you want more information on this, I'm going to put Monica's YouTube channel in the link, a link in the description down below. So check that out. Make sure you go check out her channel and subscribe. She's incredible. And the content there is really powerful, just like what you shared with us here. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up today?
No, I'm really grateful for the time. Thank you for what you're doing. And again, knowledge is power. And sometimes if we just dig a little bit deeper, if we just spend a little extra time understanding the alternatives, that's really where success happens. It's not following what everybody else is doing. It's taking the chance to step out and learn something a little bit different. So I'm grateful for what you're doing. Thank you for letting me share my message and my passion. And again, for anyone looking for help on how to save and pay for college in an alternative way, please reach out to me at monicafelton.com.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for spending time and coming on and helping to bring value to my audience and educate people. I'm so excited to share this. If you really like this video and you got a lot of value from it, please like it and subscribe to our channel. And please leave comments down below. If you want us to expand on anything you heard today, or you have questions, or you're just not sure what to do, or you're in a specific situation, leave a comment. I'll ping Monica. We will be responding to every single one, and we'll talk to everybody and see how we can help serve everyone. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.